Well, effective immediately, certain non-citizens in the state of Illinois can apply to become police officers. Good morning. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. Governor J.B. Pritzker signed more than 130 bills on Friday. He signed a bill that expands mandatory supervised release. He also signed a bill that prohibits the use of electronic cigarettes in public spaces. But he separately announced that he signed 95 House bills and 39 Senate bills, and some take effect immediately, including House Bill 3751 that allows non-citizens to apply to be police officers in the state of Illinois. We've talked about this previously in a couple of different ways, but obviously this was something we watched progress through the Senate, and then it went through the House, and got bipartisan support. And even the law enforcement community, at least the Fraternal Order of Police, they supported this measure. And I think only around 7 Republicans in both the House and Senate voted against the measure. But this is something that is thought to possibly help alleviate the retention of police officers, or to encourage more people to become police officers by allowing those who are under DACA, the Deferred Action Program for childhood arrivals. That's who this will impact. So those who are in the country illegally but have a DACA status, they'll be able to, effective immediately, apply to become police officers in the state of Illinois. So during debates, this was talked about, and Senator Chapin Rose in the Senate Republican caucus several months ago, when this came up on the Senate floor, he voiced his concern about this and was not happy about the idea of possibly allowing non-citizens to arrest citizens in the state of Illinois. Here's Senator Rose.
Senator Anderson just raised a great point about, the oaths that we take to uphold the state constitution, also the federal United States Constitution. You have to actually change federal law for this to be legal. But put all that aside for a minute. Why on earth would the most important power of any government, the most important power that must be conferred with absolute concern for how it is employed and how it can be abused, is the power to arrest. We listen every day in this building to debates about the police powers of the state of Illinois. And yet here we are conferring the police power, the ability to arrest a citizen of the state of Illinois, or frankly, a visitor to Illinois from anywhere else in the United States of America, an American citizen, to a non-citizen. This is just a foundational thing. I get that everybody's running away from law enforcement in Chicago because of everything the state of Illinois has done to law enforcement in the city of Chicago. But to backfill that and hand the power to arrest and detain a citizen of this state, or citizen of any state in the United States, to a non-citizen is a fundamental breach of democracy. It is antithetical to the police power of any state. And at the end of the day, quite frankly, it's antithetical to everything that I hear from the other side of the aisle every day in this building. This is a fundamentally bad idea. There's no fixing it, there's no amending it, there's no nothing. It's just a fundamentally bad idea. I don't care where this individual is from. Australia, they should not be able to arrest a United States citizen on United States soil. Canada should not be able to arrest a United States citizen on United States soil. You wouldn't hand this over to the Russians and say, here, come arrest us. There is a greater principle at stake here than the stuff we typically argue about in this building, a much greater principle. And you cannot hand the power to arrest any citizen of the United States, let alone the ones we represent here in Illinois, over to someone who's not a United States citizen. Thank you, Madam President.
So again, that's State Senator Chapin Rose whenever this measure ultimately passed the Senate. And some other debates that took place on the Senate floor includes the Senate sponsor, State Senator Mary Edley Allen. She said that, hey, this is going to help out with recruitment in the state of Illinois and ensuring that they have the proper levels of police officers.
We have proponents from the Chief of Police of Blue Island, Chicago Fraternal Order of Police Lodge Number 7, the Illinois Municipal League, and we removed opposition and have neutral Illinois Sheriff's Association and the Illinois Chiefs of Police.
And she said that other migrants already hold similar types of jobs, so why not law enforcement?
We currently have many DACA recipients serving in the capacity in our classrooms, as healthcare workers, and even serving in our military. So I think this would be a natural progression to allow these same people that serve in this capacity to serve our communities.
And State Senate President Don Harmon also talking about this, essentially laying out that he says history shows that people have done policing with different backgrounds for quite some time in the country, let alone up in Chicago. Senate President Harmon.
This is about Americans today. This is not about Irish-born versus Mexican-born, for instance. This is a much more fundamental question. So I'd ask you to look into your hearts and look into our history.
And he continued on to talk about that history.
So I'm going to call you back to one of my favorite movies, The Untouchables, and the dramatic entrance of the Sean Connery character as a grizzled Chicago police officer who spoke with a pronounced Irish brogue. There was a time when half of the Chicago Police Department spoke with an Irish brogue, and they didn't learn them in Chicago.
So again, this measure that ultimately passed both chambers with very little opposition, just a handful of Republicans in both chambers opposing this, passing, and Governor J.B. Pritzker enacting it. It's effective immediately, so DACA recipients can now receive a paycheck for being a police officer. So this measure signed Friday, effective immediately, allows for certain non-citizens in Illinois to apply to become not just police officers, but also deputy sheriff or special police officer. So that's just one of 130 different measures that Governor J.B. Pritzker signed. We'll go through a whole ton more after the break. So if you're interested to get kind of a high-line view of the 130 some odd bills that the governor signed, stay tuned. We'll get to that as well. More than 130 bills signed by Governor J.B. Pritzker, and we talked last segment about the measure that allows for certain non-citizens who have DACA status to now, effective immediately, apply to become police officers and sheriff's deputies and special police officers. But what about the other of the more than 130? Well, he signed a bill with a signing ceremony and a news conference that essentially brings about mandatory supervised release to the state's criminal justice system. He also signed a measure through a news release saying that starting next year, it's now going to be prohibited to use electronic cigarettes, e-cigarettes, in public spaces. Separately, he announced 95 House bills were signed and 39 Senate bills were signed. We talked about House Bill 3751, which allows non-citizens to apply to become police officers. But he also signed a measure that, effective immediately, the State Board of Education is required to adopt a literacy plan. Other laws beginning January 1st, 2024, allow Illinois licensed motor vehicle dealers to conduct sales over the internet and deliver vehicles to customers. That seems like something that's already going on. This just really codifies it. And you can think about the dealers like Carvana. But now it's going to allow for all car dealers to do such things beginning January 1st. House Bill 1199 designates October as Italian American Heritage Month. And that'll be observed again in the month of October. That begins January 1st. Also effective January 1st, House Bill 1268. It allows a person convicted of a felony to serve as the executor of somebody's estate if certain criteria are met. And I think some of those criteria include not having a felony for financial exploitation or something along those lines. But that's an interesting story there, too, with that bill now law. Beginning next year, House Bill 2123 creates a cause of action for individuals who are the target of deep fakes and other digitally altered sexual images. So if you're the victim of somebody posting a deep fake with your face on the body of a adult film actor performing certain acts, you can now, if you can find the person who posted it, you can now bring a private right of action against that person. Also beginning next year, House Bill 2214 requires the Department of Human Services to track the scope and frequency of stolen SNAP benefits, especially when those SNAP benefits have been skimmed by a card skimmer. That's interesting. I'd like to see that stat. Beginning July 1st, 2025, so delayed quite a bit, House Bill 2297 expands reporting requirements to state agencies to include non-binary and gender non-conforming in their employment reports. So no longer is it going to be, how many women do you have? How many men do you have? How many African Americans do you have? How many Hispanic do you have? How many Caucasians do you have? Now it's going to include, apparently, how many non-binary, how many gender non-conforming people do you have working for state agencies? Starting at January 1st, 2024, House Bill 2431 makes it unlawful for video conferencing while you're driving. We've seen even state lawmakers do this. We've seen even, people providing testimony remotely to state House and Senate committees. And some of them do it remotely while it looks like they're driving. So beginning next year, that will be unlawful to do any kind of video conferencing while you're driving. House Bill 2493 expands unpaid leave for work. So an employee can take a total no more than 2 weeks of unpaid leave for specified reasons related to a family or a household member who's killed in a violent crime. And this is something that people pushed back against, saying, well, if you lose a son or a daughter to something else other than violent crime, why don't they get the same type of consideration? But that's interesting. That begins January 1st, 2024. Access to fentanyl testing strips. It's expanded with House Bill 3203 beginning next year. K through 12 schools, they got to start carrying opioid antagonists on campus beginning next year. In separate bills, now law, jobs of transporting biosolids, power washing to remove coatings, and light pole and traffic light workers, they're all being added to the Prevailing Wage Act starting January 1st. Also beginning next year, House Bill 3808 clarifies the satellite services and internet streaming services are not subject to a separate local tax. All right. Effective immediately, Senate Bill 1463 eliminates fines and fees assessed in cases where minors were convicted if they're under the age of 18. This is interesting because, if you're found to have violated a crime and you got a fee or a penalty or something, you should pay it, right? I mean, if you're found guilty. But this would take away those fees and fines for people who were convicted of something under the age of 18. And we'll see how that plays out. Senate Bill 2047 clarifies income tax pass-through for a partnership or S corporation and ensures that pass-through is permitted and applied uniformly across credits. So small business owners take note of that one. That begins January 1st of 2024. Again, Senate Bill 2047. And that's kind of just a little bit of an overview of some of the more than 130 laws that Governor J.B. Pritzker signed last week on Friday. And if you get a chance, you could see the link on my Twitter handle. or I should say X handle, just search Bishop on Air or go to thecentersquare.com and find Illinois, and you'll be able to see Pritzker signs more than 130 bills, including allowing non-citizens to be police. You can read the overview of some of the highlights, but also you can click through and go ahead and read for yourself all 130 plus of those bills that Governor J.B. Pritzker took action on Friday. Fascinating. Follow me anywhere, Bishop on Air, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Just search Bishop on Air and we can connect that way. Appreciate everybody tuning in as always, and happy Monday morning.